and welcome to episode 1 of the Ryan Laley Games Podcast. With me today is Chris from Foggy Box.
Hello. How are you, Ryan?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for joining me in this first episode in this new venture of mine, trying out the whole podcasting line of work and see how it goes. As I mentioned in my various comments to the public, this is a very fluid thing. We'll see how it goes, but ultimately what we're going to be doing in each of these episodes is talking about a particular topic and then going through some emails from you guys that we've got before the podcast to answer some questions regarding what we're talking about. So, how are we all doing during this weird time? Because if you don't know, we are at the moment in lockdown due to a worldwide pandemic. It's been quite an interesting venture. How are you finding it, Chris?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a change. It's lots of short commutes to work, a couple of feet rather than a 20 or so minute cycle that I usually have.
Nice.
There's a lot more remote working, especially when doing console stuff. Some consoles you're not allowed to take out of an office, or you have to be under certain conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sort of getting used to that. It's slowed things down a little, but we're getting back into the groove slowly. What about for you? What have you been affected by?
The only thing I'm affected by is I'm now, rather than teaching all day long, I am now babysitting all day long. So
Same thing,
I'm still
really,
doing basically the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing. Still dealing with crying young children.
Yeah.
So don't feel massive change. I was hoping I'd be more productive. I don't know how you're finding. Do you find yourself more productive this time?
That's well. So I've got a bigger window, so I get to stare at that a lot of the day, especially when it's nice outside. I've
to the fridge.
I've been doing a lot of work, and I've been trying to relearn some things. I've been sort of taking the time because I know that whilst we're adjusting over, there's going to be a few hiccups on the way, especially with communication. But because there's two of us working on a project, we don't want to be stepping on each other's toes. So we've sort of set being like, hey, you, for the next hour, you do that bit, and I won't touch it because I don't want to do the same scene as you, and then we're going to have conflict in the merge. So I've been sort of doing some sort of extra, so I'm Unity based, so I've been doing Unity tutorials and ironically starting new projects. So that's a perfect sort of segue into the topic of the first episode.
Yes, excellent. Well done. They saved my job for me.
Sorry.
So the topic for today is quite apt, really, being the first episode of the podcast, is, as Chris said, starting a new project. This is a common thing that we all come across from not just game development, but in all sense of creative projects, is the hump at the start, the first starting block. Where do we get our ideas from, and how do we push those ideas forward into a more practical sense? So let's start with you, Chris. You're the guest for today's episode. So you where do you start? What kind of things are your starting blocks on when you come to start a new project?
So depending on the project, so for instance, I've always wanted to make a twin stick shooter.
Mm-hmm.
So I love Enter the Gungeon and I love Nuclear Throne. So I've always wanted to go, okay, how does that system work? So if I'm coming up with an idea and I know my inspiration, I'll try and take something from that. So for instance, procedural generation. And so I went into Unity and I opened up a new project and I started figuring out or looking online for resources on how procedural generation works and how the different types there are. The one Nuclear Throne uses is called the drunken man technique or method. Essentially what you do is you send out loads of little drunk men, and every step they go, okay, do I want to go left? Do I want to go forward? Do I want to go right? Do I want to die here? Or do I want to spawn another man and send him on his way? So as it spreads out, eventually they make the decision to end, but you get a nice sort of spreaded three like corridors of like dungeon, and it looks really nice. And obviously you've got the room-based one where you say, I want rooms that are 10 by 10 and fill it with random gubbins and stuff like that. So, once I've done that, then I've locked that down and I can say, oh, okay, I liked that bit. And I normally use a Trello or like something like Notion to track certain things, and I can drag that into the bit, and you get a nice little endorphin rush of like, hey, I did a thing. And then you move on to the next step, and you try and break down what it is each mechanic and what it is. And once you figure it out, you little test, see if it's fun, and then you move on to the next thing. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Now, being a part of a twosome at Foggy Box, do you share those ideas across to your partner, and do you work on that same idea, or do you find yourself branching out, both of you, to different ideas and then coming together at the end and pitching your different ideas to each other? Where do you go in that sense?
So normally what we do is if one of us has an idea, we'll say it to each other and we'll go, okay, that sounds cool. Try it. We've got time to try these things, so we'll try it. We'll play test it. And we'll see if it works. But what we try and do is that if we have a problem with something, we try to come up with a solution to that, or at least a way to fix it before dismissing that idea entirely. So I would never be like, nah, that's not good. Let's just not do that. I'd be like, that's not good because this, and this. Maybe if we tried this, that might fix it. Or maybe if we took that out completely but did this. So it's not, you don't want to just dismiss an idea. You want to try to either change it or tweak it, but you need to know when to give up. Like you can't fix not every idea is a great idea. There was a great YouTube video, which was a GDC talk this year, but obviously GDC was cancelled, by Tom Francis of Elite, Wizards, Tactical Breach Wizards. And it's called Consider Giving Up. And it's a really good talk. It's only 5 minutes long. I do recommend watching it. But it's just, figure out what's working. What isn't working. And then you can realize that you stop doing it and then you focus on the next thing that will hopefully work better. And then if that cycle happens again, you've done a little bit of time, but you haven't wasted a lot of time because you understand that failing, it's not failure, it's how things progress. You need to stop doing things at certain points.
Yeah. And I agree. I think that's the number one and most important thing is learn when to stop and realize that no, this can't be done, or it's either too difficult, not fun, or you just don't have the time, resources available to actually make it. And there's a hesitance in a lot of people, especially when they're starting out in something like games development, where they feel like they've gone too deep in now. They must carry on with the idea.
Yeah.
And I think that's the wrong step forward. I think you have to cut those losses early and recognize, hang on, this was a learning experience. I've learned what I can and can't do, and let's move on with a different idea, because it's not necessarily gone forever. You could put on like a backbench or back burner and say like, I don't have like the skill necessarily right now, but I may do later on, or I may not have the team I need right now to do it. So I may come back to it later on when I have the team or resources available to me to actually make that.
How do you find it? Sorry, but go on. How do you find it when obviously I have like someone I can be like, hey, what do you think? And they go, yeah, that works. But as a solo developer, you obviously have to have that conversation, unless you have someone you can send stuff to or ask an opinion. But a lot of the time, if you're doing that, how do you have that conversation with yourself, essentially? How do you go, you know what, this isn't it? Because it's a lot harder to do because it's your baby, it's your thing you're trying to create. Like, how do you cope with that?
It is very difficult. And I'd say it's a learned skill, because there's many times where in the past I've spent way too long on a project and not given up when I should have given up, or had grandiose ideas and failed miserably. And I say it is a learned skill. It's something you get, and you kind of tailor your own individual foresight into a project. And I feel the way I do it now is I have this rule where I have a couple of rules, but the first rule is before I start a project, I would identify what the challenges are and what are the big hurdles, what are the big issues that I can foresee happening. This may be like a new technique, a new mechanic that I don't know about, or a new graphical style. It could be anything like that. And I usually try and see if I can get the idea to have a maximum of 3 of these big challenges. Once I've got these challenges listed out, or in my head listed out, I would sit down and I'd just grey box test them in the prototype phase in a separate project, away from everything else, and just solve that problem. And I would spend not a long time, but a considerable amount of time just trying to solve those big problems. And once I've solved those big problems, then I'm feeling a lot more confident going forwards. Okay, I know how to do the rest of the game, and it's now the challenge is bringing all these things together. So if I'm foreseeing too many of these challenges at the start, I'll stop. And things and as time goes on and you get more familiar with your own skill set and your own time availability and other resources, you kind of get a feel for it before having to do that process of listing these things out. Like, for instance, I know that I'll never make a online RPG or MMO of any kind because that's way too much work. I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. And it's even the same for like just normal RPG. It's just a typical RPG. It's again a lot of work. It requires a lot of time, and time I don't feel like I could devote to it because I do have other commitments like family, other work, and so forth. So I think you have to be real with yourself and understand what your own limitations are. And I think, I mean, that to me is a clear example where people are misstepping, because I do get a lot of emails from new developers or people that are trying to learn game development that come up with all these ideas. And I'm honest with them. I'm saying, like, unless you know how to do X, Y, Z, then I would say don't do this project. And they are the projects which are like, I want to make an MMORPG. I want to make this amazing whole new open world experience. I'm like, oh, great, but you're not going to do it unless you know or have the experience or have millions of pounds or dollars to throw at the project. I mean, when it comes to understanding your own limitations, do you guys understand each other well enough now where you are aware of what each of you can and can't do? Because ideally, you're split into, when you're in a team, you've got one guy who's the programmer, which is your partner, and I believe, isn't it? And then you've got yourself, which is more the art person. Are you aware of each other's limitations?
Well, we're both programmers. Like we're
okay.
Alistair actually did all the models for this. But what we do is that I do, like, I've always loved doing design, as in like level design and mechanic design, and I like the reason I like game development so much is it's problem solving, but in a fun way. Like, how do I get this character to here? Or it's like a maths equation, but instead you're just, you're using jumping, shooting, or and it's a satisfying way of doing it. But we both know that, like, Alistair always deals with the back end stuff, so all the systems he normally has, because he really enjoys sort of working on those things. While I like the more gameplay orientated stuff. So we don't normally get in each other's way, but when it comes to integrating that, we need to know where we're both at on how, like, so how, if I want to do something, but I need to hook into one of his systems, I need to know how to do that. And whether that's down to we actually have a conversation, or it's just good commenting, or, good naming conventions, which actually makes it obvious what you're doing. But in regards to what you're saying in terms of starting a project with, having the scope that keeps it small and not doing a MMORPG.
Yes.
Like, originally we were going to have online in our game. But I
think you've mentioned your game. Do you want to mention your game? You haven't mentioned it.
Yeah, we made a local co-op party game called Brunch Club. It's on Switch and Steam. And originally it did have, we did plan and we started implementing an online, online multiplayer. Now it's just local co-op, because we realized that, one, we didn't have time to learn the entirety of how to do that. There's a system called Photon we were going to use, and we had no idea how to do it. And also it changed the way the game played. It's a game that requires communication and working together as a team, but also it enhanced when you're playing next to people that you get on with, because you have that internal rivalry, and it really encourages you to, like, want to do well. But if something goes wrong, that we always see that people blame each other. And they never, like, you can't do that over the internet. You can do stuff like Discord and stuff, but it's never as sort of real as being in the same room. And once we realized that, we were like, well, let's not waste any more time on this. And we just brushed it. We're like, nope, no online. And I think it has hurt us in terms of sales, because obviously an online game is going to do a lot better than a local co-op game, because you don't have to have friends around. You don't have to have people to play with. But you got to know, again, you got to know when to give up, and you got to know when something's out of your, remit.
Yeah, and I can actually a very similar case for me was my mobile game Blob that actually had online multiplayer originally planned, and it was what it was like a 1v1 PvP where one was a green blob and the other one was like a red blob, and you're on a level and you have 30 seconds to cover the level with your coloured slime as much as possible. Sort of like
Splatoon Tron style.
Yeah, pretty much that. So, but there was some traps on level, and if you fell off the level, got hit by a trap, all your slime disappeared. So there was this race to cover as much ground as possible, and there would be these pickups around where you collide with them, and they would detonate and spread more of your slime everywhere. It was really cool, and I got it all working locally.
Yeah.
And it was cool to play locally. However, the problem was that online multiplayer for mobile games, I weren't too up on it. I had to learn it all. So my original plan was to do peer-to-peer because one person, and a lot sending very basic data.
Yeah.
But as I quickly learned, I'm not an online person, so as I quickly learned that mobile games you can't do peer-to-peer because the nature of a mobile is that it's always, because it's moving, doesn't have a static IP address. So you can't do peer-to-peer unless you are messaging someone and say, here's my IP address, connect to it. There's no way to really do it.
Interesting.
So it was like, right, okay, so let's try and figure out a way to do matchmaking then, or try and get, so you can send over like a temporary IP address over to people. And it just turned into this like a rolling ball of problems. And I then looked into dedicated servers and trying to look at Amazon's Game Lift and their services to try and do it. And because I'm not up on networking stuff, my mind just glazed over it.
Yeah.
I was like, and my brain just went, nope, I'm not doing it. I just cut that feature out because it's like, no, I can't do that feature.
How long were you working on that though? Like, what was the a week?
Not long. It was literally like 2 weeks, I think, of worth of work. And I was happy with it. And I know the concept of it is good and it worked and was fun. So I know it is good idea. It's because of my limitations in my own knowledge and experience that I just didn't have. I had to put on the back burner because I had this internal goal of mine to get this game done. And I didn't want to waste a few months just trying to work out one game mode, which wouldn't be the main game mode. Especially when you think about mobile games. When you think mobile games, you don't really think online multiplayer. It's not a key thing that you hear about people doing a lot of. If it is online multiplayer, it's usually like asynchronous multiplayer and
or a very big studio.
Or a very big studio, like Great Shadow Legends. Yeah. So again, it's that same thing as you guys, where I had to just cut that feature out because of my own shortcomings, and it's something that I may go back to when I've got some time to sit down and just learn online multiplayer, dedicated server multiplayer. But at this moment in time, I'm just so exhausted. I just don't want to. So I put it down on the back burner. Speaking of back burners, how many games would you say you've got on your back burner where you started and stopped?
So when you told me the topic of this, I actually opened up my GitHub to have a look. I've got about like 20 things on there of just random stuff. One's just called War Game, and I don't even know what it is. I'm assuming it's a war game, but like strategy, is it? I don't know. I've got so many. Like,
it's insane, isn't it? Like I'm looking at mine now, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then I've got a prototypes folder, which is full of like another folder. Oh. Yeah, I've got other folders. This is not on Git, just local.
Okay.
I've another like 15. Yeah. Maybe I've got like, again, it been between 20 and 25 different projects to either prototyped or just going for. And I actually went through them before the start of this and had a look through and see what were the games I made on, because some of them I haven't looked at since, like this one here. How long ago was this one? It must have been 2014.
Wow.
And this one was a dragon game where you rode a dragon in a 2D side scrolling. Like, it was meant to be procedure generated all like beautiful watercolored painting with a dragon flying around, and it didn't get much further than making a floating ball go up and down. And my folder's filled with stuff like that, and it's I mean Blob itself, like the current iteration that's coming out is from folder 1, 2, 3, 5 of that game, because there's an original copy, and then I went to go back and add level creation, so the player can make level creation. So I prototyped level creation using Blob as like as a sort of template using the assets, because the assets worked already. So I went through that process, and that worked, but it didn't work. I didn't like using the engine that it was working in. So I said, right, I'll come back to this later on with a different engine. Blob was made in
Game Maker,
yeah, it was made in Game Maker Studio. So and Game Maker Studio, it worked fine, but the hard part of Game Maker Studio is building UI, because it all has to be coded in. There's no UI designer. You have to put it all in yourself.
I remember that from the college days.
Yeah, it's a right pick. So I said to myself, you know what, this would be much easier to make in Unreal, because I could. It's a simple function in Unreal. It's a simple drag and drop. Whereas in Game Maker, I constantly have to go through it over and over and over again. So that's what that put on the back burner. And your idea of a twin stick shooter with randomly generated levels, I've got one of those.
Nice.
It was called, what was it called? Death Limited, I think it was.
I don't have a name for mine. It's just called Twin Stick.
Yeah, no, I had a name. Yeah, Death Limited, here it is. And I done what you done with the Drunken Man random generation, with it randomly going out and deciding whether to spawn another one or spawn a room, and it went on and on. And that was a twin stick shooter based in the underworld, where you played a death character. Right. You had guns rather than a scythe, and you had to collect souls to build up your office, because you was like a postal office, and you had to like sort of like a building simulator in it. And yeah, it went on. There's loads of stuff in that game, but again, didn't get much further than it got to the point where I went, right, I should really make some art for this. And being a programmer person, I was like, nah. So I just moved on.
That's where I normally fail. So as I said, me and Alistair, we're not artists. Alistair can model a little bit in Blender. I can do a tiny bit in Blender. I can make something simple, but luckily our game is low poly. We don't have any textures, like real textures. Ours is all materials. That's why our game file size is so low. But like we released it at like 160 meg for the full game.
Yeah.
But the problem, one thing I struggle with is when something looks bad, I don't want to continue with it. It could feel really nice to play, but I'm like running around with a little capsule, and I'm like, this doesn't. It shouldn't be a driving force. This looks awful, therefore it's bad, because it could play brilliantly, and it could be everything you want it to be. It's always I have to get past that mental barrier of just because it doesn't look great, and in my head it's all these great graphics and it's particles and everything's going to look fantastic. I mean, I can't do that. I'll have to find someone who can. But it's getting it past that stage. Everyone has their own thing that keeps them back from progressing with a project. Mine is that. I don't know if you have, I don't know what yours is. Do you have one?
Yeah, it's very similar. It's art. I'm getting better with it. I've spent some time over the past year just trying to force myself to do a bit more modelling, a bit more texturing. It's the texturing for me that I find myself limping at, and also animation.
I agree.
Because they're not something I do regularly. So all the games now I'm coming up with ideas for require little to no animation and texturing. So or very basic textures if they are. So the next game I've got in mind is something that I don't want to do any animation for. So there is going to be one animation, but they're all going to share the same animation asset. So it's simply just to swap out the mesh.
Oh, okay.
But and I think that's important to know is if you know where your limitations are at, is you design your game around that. So like you guys said about using low poly, using materials rather than full blown textures. You work around your limitations and you work with it and design the game that complements it. I think that's what's important, is designing something that complements your limitations rather than making a game that is a detriment because of your limitations. I think that
we said, like, when someone wants to ask us, like, what's your art style? We were like, non-talented artist. Which I mean, I was like, well,
Yeah.
we couldn't do it, so we just made it our art style. If everything looks the same, if everything follows that theme, therefore it becomes an art style. If everything's all mismatched and assets taken from here, then it does look like one of those cheap asset flips. If everything is coherent and consistent, it looks like a game that is like that on purpose, and no one's none the wiser that just because two people don't know what they're doing, they don't care. If it all looks the same, then it works.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to note. That. So thinking about, we've discussed about what each of us do, where our limitations are. I think we should start talking about some tips to pass on to people who are listening to this about where they should go. And my first tip is to do what is called a SWOT analysis. Are you aware of what a SWOT analysis is yet, Chris? Do you know what that is?
Might do, but the name might be different.
Okay, cool. So SWOT analysis is it's something that's used in business as well as all project management type stuff. And it's usually something you do at the start of a project. And if you're on your own and making stuff on your own, you don't need to write this down. But if you are typically working with a partner or an investor, it usually helps to in your pitch to that investor. I don't know if there's something you guys had to do with your games, but part of it usually is something called a SWOT analysis. And what a SWOT analysis involves is an acronym. So S stands for strengths, W are weaknesses, O is for opportunities, and T is for threats. And it basically covers everything we've been talking about. So strengths are, what are your internal strengths? So looking at yourself or your team, what are your skill sets? What are your resources? What are your internal strengths to this project that you have an idea for? Then moving on to weaknesses is the inverse of that. So where are your internal issues? Like where do you find your shortcomings? So as we were saying, art is an issue for both of us. So that would be our weaknesses. And then we go through the opportunities. And then the opportunities are external good things. So if you were to make this game or was making this game, what externally from yourself would be an opportunity to improve yourself or the project, make it successful? And these could be things like, if I make this game, I have an opportunity to network and work with partners that I've never worked before, be it publishers, platform holders, other developers, whatever it may be. It could be an opportunity for me to learn a new piece of software. It could be an opportunity for me to learn a new technique or game mechanic. And then the positive things that aren't inherently internal to yourself. And then finally you got threats. And these again are the inverse of opportunities. So what external factors will have a negative impact on the success of your project? And for an example of these could be your target audience, your market. Is the market still there? Is it viable? Will it still be there by the time your project is finished? Is your audience wide enough to cover your costs? Is the platform that you want to go on, is it changing? Is it going on a new revision? Is it introducing new limitations or anything like that? And as I say, these are external things that may affect your project. So we do a SWOT analysis, and if you Google it, it's SWOT. You'll find other diagrams that other people have used. And when you fill this out, if you did it on paper first of all and filled it out with your project in mind, if you find yourself in the negative column of the weaknesses and threats being a lot larger than your strengths and weaknesses, that's an early indication that your project should probably stop and you should move on to something else. So it's a good way to straight away see if your project's worth carrying on. And that's why I say it's useful for pitches when you're pitching to an investor or a publisher of some kind, is that you can pitch to them like things like, what it may not be in that sort of format, but you're still talking about, okay, this is why this project will work, this is why it won't work, here are the potential threats to the project, here's what could be opportunistic for you guys as publishers or investors, like what could you get out of it. It is that sort of discussion that goes around it. And I think that's a good tip for anyone starting out in a new project, is to do something called a SWOT analysis.
Yeah, I really like that. That's a good way of doing it, is having it all on the table. Obviously, you have to know your own ability. You'll be honest with yourself. You can't be like,
Yes.
no, I can definitely do that. If you can't, then you can't. Like, don't kid yourself. You only know as much as you know.
And if you don't know it or you don't have that skill, the other option is, do you have enough money to cover that skill by hiring someone else? That's the other option there as well.
Or
that usually is quite expensive.
Have enough money to spend the time to learn it.
Yes, because obviously if you are only doing this as your job, then you need to obviously cover your food, rent, wherever it may be. See, and I think it's important to realise as well is there's a common. I'll do another podcast episode about this in the future about working with others and getting people to help on your projects, and you need to be willing to sometimes throw money at the problem. I've done that for Blob.
I've done that.
So yeah, did you guys do it for?
We did it for a shader because neither of us knew shader, so we just paid someone to do it. We used Fiverr and we found the guy and he was like, me, 10 quid.
Me too.
I was like, yeah, awesome, thank you. And
I used it as well.
Perfect. It's exactly the kind of thing that it's made for.
Yes, I can't attest to how great Fiverr actually was for me because I'll tell you the story of, again, another topic we'll go on to, which in the future episode would be about the wall, when you hit the wall. But I hit the wall during development of Blob, and there was 4 pieces of artwork that I needed to do to finish the game off. And they were relatively big pieces of artwork, and there was a certain look that I wanted them to have. So I was looking around for assets I could just buy, but none were really fitting the bill. I worked around the problem trying to think, okay, could I do it in a non-artistic way? And every time I did it, it didn't look like I wanted it to. So I went, I definitely want it to look like this. I'll try and learn how to do it. And I spent a year. I wasted a year. Well, I say wasted a year. I was doing the channel at the time, and that was when the channel really took off. So it wasn't entirely wasted. I didn't have the time to actually do it, but I was finding that I didn't have the time to actually learn it, which I originally wanted to do. And I wanted these hand-painted pieces of artwork for the game. There's only 4 of them. Four pieces of artwork were holding up the game's development.
Yeah.
And it got to February of this year, where I went, sod it, and I went to Fiverr, and I found this artist, trying to remember her name now, Mariana, and I cannot pronounce her surname. I'm so sorry. I haven't got it at hand. But Mariana, I emailed her on Fiverr, and I had the concept art for it. I drew out the concept art already beforehand, and I sent her like screenshots of the game. I said, can you please help me? I need these 4 images done. And she went, yep. And it was, I don't think she minds me telling the cost, but it was about $80. And after a week, she sent me these 4 pieces of artwork, and man, they were perfect. They were spot on. And that they are in Blob, they are the world select screen islands. So if you're playing Blob, go to the world select screen, and they're the 4 islands there. And these were hand-drawn pieces of art. And I attest to her, she was amazing. And so much so that I went back to her and made her update one of my old pieces of artwork that I made. And I thought, now see if she could do something a bit more with this. And I paid her a bit more for that. And it's money well spent. Because it's money well spent because it stopped me. It made me finish the game because it was the last piece of artwork that I needed to get done for the game, and it made me cross that barrier and made me finish the game. So things like Fiverr is amazing for that, and I feel like throwing money at the problem should be applauded as a good solution. There are too many people expecting people to work for free, and I feel like you can't. You should never, if you are an artist or any kind of person like that, you should never work for free. You should always value your time.
Yeah, know your worth. If you're good at something, don't do it for free. And if you offer someone your services for free, it just devalues you completely, and it looks like the thing that you're offering isn't good enough to be paid for.
Same. And don't ever work for things like
exposure.
Exposure. The classic exposure. Oh, this exposure is going to feed me tonight. Or the other one you get is, if this game does well, you'll get a split of the profits. Yeah. Classic line, and you're like, that's if this game ever gets done. I'd happily say that the percentage of games in the whole entire world that are not complete is 99.999. That people, I say, between me and you alone, we've got 50 games, I think, sitting on our various hard drives that aren't complete. And, you should always be willing to charge for your services. Anyway, that's that side tangent. We'll more on that topic in a future episode. But so SWOT analysis back on target. My SWOT analysis idea is my first tip. Do you have any potential tips you want to give to anyone listening?
Well, I've opened up my Trello. So what I normally do, I have a couple of Trellos open. So I have one for Brunch Club, and I have one for the Twin Stick. So it was a Twin Stick roguelike, and I have everything separated into mechanics and like if it's related to that. So one for level generation. I've got a list for level generation. I do recommend Trello. Trello is really good. You can set up lists, cards, you can add labels to them, and it makes organization very simple and easy to see. And you can drag things in between, so you can have columns of complete.
Yeah, and it's free.
And it's free. It's very good.
Free for everyone, just so you know.
And also, you can have multiple people use it at the same time. So I have one for I have one called level generation, and then within that, I have all the types of level generation that I tested. So I had 4 different scenes. One did the drunken man. Another one just did like room generation. Another one did like Spelunky style. So I have a 4x4 grid, and within that I generate a room, but I know that I need to get to an end goal down in the bottom left somewhere. And what it does is it figures out a route, and then it fills in all the others with random rooms. So I have all those types of generation. Then I'll move them over to complete, and then I have like a player list, and then within that it will have move, jump. Like if I have anything special, like a roll or how do I do pickups? And then I move on to items. So it's like every item needs to be pickupable. It needs to have this certain like stats, has an ID, it has this. And I break it down into each individual thing, and I can manually tick them off. You can also set up checklists, which is really handy. And it's just a good way of sorting things. But I also have a thing which is called the ice box, which we have on Brunch Club, which is where if I have an idea, it will go in there. It doesn't mean it's a good idea. It doesn't mean it's in scope. It's an idea that I really thought that could be good down the line. I know it needs to be down the line. It's not something I want to work on now, because what I'm working on now is in scope. It's simple. It's getting the main gameplay down. But it's really good to always write down all like your ideas, because otherwise one day you'll even if it's not used in this game or this project or whatever, you might want to use it. And if it's always there as a reminder, you'll go, oh, I had that really good idea once. What was it? And I can go back and I can find it. I can find the information regarding it. So I would always say write down all your ideas. They don't necessarily have to be the best ideas in the world. It could be something completely unrelated. Just jot it down somewhere, even if you have a little book. So I used to have a notebook. It's always good because that one day might solve something else. It might give you an idea for, say you have to abandon this project and you go, actually that mechanic, that would be really good if I did it, put a spin on it and I did it like this. Everything you think of, you have to give a value to, and otherwise you're just going to come up with ideas all the time and be like, well, these are all useless. If you write down every idea, everything has a value, and everything could be good if you nurture it and develop it in the right way. So my advice would be just have an organizational system which is obvious. If I sent this to you, you'd be like, oh, okay, this is clearly a twin stick. Here's the player. Here's how that works. You make it incredibly obvious. It's a lot of extra effort, yeah, and you have to put the time into making it look and be presentable and descriptive. But it means that even if you leave this project for a year and come back to it, you know exactly where you are. You know exactly what's complete. You know exactly how every little mechanic and niche works. And anyone else you bring onto the project will do as well. That's my bit of advice, is planning but also chuck ideas into a place where you can always find them in case you need them.
Excellent. That sounds great. That's great tips. So you've got SWOT analysis and save all your ideas. Even if it's on a bit of paper somewhere, make sure you save them all. I personally have like a little notebook, which I would recommend to all developers, is to have a little notebook next to you whilst working.
I agree.
Writing something that tangible down on paper for some reason just triggers a lot more in my brain than just typing up in like a Google Doc does. So it really helps me out personally. But find what works for you, and it is a learning process. This is something that you will it's something that you have to really mess up on first, and then learn from that mistake. I feel a lot of the time happens. Because I feel like I think it's safe to say that we've both had that in the past, where we could say that we went too far with a project and wasted some time on it, and we didn't have to.
Yes, very much so.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Chris. So what we're going to do now is head into emails. Okay, so emails. If you want to email the show, it's at podcast@ryanlaley.com. That is podcast@ryanlaley.com. And this email is from Nate, and Nate is asking, when it comes to making a mechanic in a game, what is your thought process in Unreal with nodes specifically? So this would probably be me more for myself than Chris, because Chris is mostly Unity based, but the thought process still goes across over to functions, because nodes and all that in Unreal are the same as functions in Unity, essentially. So when it comes to making a mechanic in a game, where do you start with if you're working in Unity, for example?
So okay, well, shall we just come up with a mechanic and we'll try and break it down? So say if it's shooting, okay. So here's a gun. Everyone has guns in the game at one point. So what I would do there is go, okay, how do I want this to? I'd break it down. So do I want a physical projectile, or do I want to use a ray cast? So that hit scan style projection.
Yeah.
So once I choose that, I can be like, okay, so I'll program that. And then from that, you go, well, if I want more than one type of gun, well, how do I do that? But I need to keep them all. I want to keep the gun class. I don't want to have one type of gun class for every gun. I don't want to have an assault rifle. So I go, okay, well, I'll do an enum, an enumerator to be able to choose that. Okay, I want single fire, full auto, burst. Okay, well, how do I do that? So I would always break it down into its component parts. If you break down a gun into its component parts, you have the trigger, the barrel, the magazine, the slide. Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it. Is it needs all these things to work, but they all need to come together in a correct way to work properly. So if you have an idea, break it all the way down to its basic functions and go, okay, how do these come together to work in a cohesive way? And what I normally do is have a separate scene. If I've made a level generation thing, I won't put a player in. I'll have a scene with a player, figure out his movement, and then combine all those things into the scene where I can start doing a demo sandboxy kind of level. Because otherwise you get, you get distracted and you go, oh, that looks a bit weird. Well, I'm trying to focus on this. So if it's the only thing you can focus on, it's always good. Yeah.
And a very similar process for me in Unreal. So again, breaking down say taking a gun and breaking it down to its basic components. And what I would do is looking at a gun as an object rather than looking at the person, look at the gun as an object and say, okay, so the gun as a class has particular behaviors. What can a gun do and what it can't do? So I would say, okay, when you pull the trigger, it would start shooting. And when you start shooting, it will fire a bullet out. Now, depending on what type of gun it could be it a semi-automatic or burst or manual reloading gun or whatever it may be, you have to release the trigger to shoot again. So I need to make sure that the start shoot and the firing of the bullet are two separate events. And then when I let go of the trigger, I've got a stop shoot. So I've got I've got three events that I would have. I have a start shoot, a fire bullet, and a stop shoot. Because my fire bullet may continue going on whilst I'm still holding down the trigger. So I've got those ones. And then I'll go, okay, what else I've got? Well, I've got reload. So reload will be another event. So I'm breaking down the behaviors of a gun and what it can and can't do. And separating those out into events or triggers for this class. And then I would go down the route, okay, what properties would this gun have? And like you were saying, what type of gun would it be it semi-automatic, burst, whatever it may be?
Yeah.
What would be its fire rate? What would be its clip size? So on and so forth. And breaking it down as many pieces as possible. And it's always best, I find, to break it down to as many different small pieces as possible. It's a lot easier to build them together up rather than break it down later on. Because otherwise you find yourself just basically deleting a load of code and starting again. So if you were thinking about every try and turn everything into a variable at the start, and then change things to constants later on if they need to be constants or public, private, whatever they may be. That's usually where I'd start. Is I'll start thinking, okay, what are the behaviors of this gun or whatever mechanic I'm working on? So for jumping, for example, I'm like, okay, what does my jumping mechanic have to be able to do? And if I'm looking at like Mario, is it going to have to do a triple jump? Is it going to have to do a high jump? Is it going to have to do a double jump? Is it going to have to do a ground pound? And thinking about, okay, if that's what it can do, then I can plan ahead. And that planning ahead's kind of key. You need to know what your thing is going to have to do. As I said, it's a lot easier to put it in at the start than it is to put it in at the end, and change the behavior of it. So break down the mechanic into the smallest possible components, and look at real life. And going back to our gun example, when I was looking at making a gun object, a class for a gun, that gun class would be very much separate from the player. The player is a different class entirely. The player will have a pull trigger action, like they have a shoots function, but the gun is what's going to be handling the actual shooting of the bullets. It's not the player. And with that separation in mind, then that allows you to do things like swapping guns out and things like that. So break down your mechanic as much as possible, and then work out what are the events you need, and then from there you can work out the actual process of each of those events. Did you want to read out the next one from Josh, Chris?
Oh, the really long one?
Yeah, the really long one. That's it.
Should I... do you want me to quickly read through it and I can shorten it?
No, he's gone. Crack it. Just read it out loud.
So Josh says, I'm currently in school at FIT for computer animation and interactive media in NYC. And since COVID-19, we're all being sent home. With this change of workflow and cancellation of all our industry events, it has quickly made me realise that I'm not going to be able to make the industry connections I would have. How as someone freshly graduating would I approach making things that I can get me a foot in the door, or something to make me money all on my own? I feel lost working at home, and any advice to a newcomer would be awesome. I love all your tutorials, and they have helped me more than any teacher in Unreal. Ah, how nice. Is that why you want me to read it?
Yeah, I just want people to read me compliments. It's nice. So obviously circumstances at the moment in time is that COVID-19 or the coronavirus has kind of forced everyone to work from home. And obviously, as we're all aware, like things like GDC, E3, PAX, all these various events that happen around the world are being cancelled or postponed. And they usually are typically great places for people to meet up and meet other developers and network and get to know each other. And especially when you're trying to get a job, get your foot in the door a little bit. So my advice would be to, whilst you're at home, I say because of the lockdowns surrounding the world, keep yourself busy by working on your portfolio and working on your various projects. So you Josh, are in animation and stuff. I assume you're doing animation as your main thing. Then work on your animation portfolio and get that and improve that skill, and don't ever stop developing that portfolio. And even though you're working from home and you're not able to go to events and things like that, these developers and all that are still online. They're still on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on their websites. They're still there. You can still message them stuff. You can still tag them and stuff. It may annoy them, I don't know, but you can still do that. Nothing's stopping you from doing that. And I think we should also think about like where the online communities are developing for game developers. I mean, what online communities are you aware of, Chris, that you go to?
I've just opened up my Discord. Well, apart from the Ryan Laley Discord, little plug for you there, another one, don't worry. I'm in the Indie World Order and the Game Dev Network Discords, and they have channels where, hey, I need help in Unity, Unreal, Game Maker, Godot, even Roblox. They have a Roblox channel. As well as breaking down into, hey, I need help with art, code. But there's also, hey, here's works in progress, showcase channel, game jam channel, social, just talking about game dev, talking about the industry. And these are great places to like post like a 5-second GIF of something you're working on. GIFs are a really powerful tool, especially on Twitter and social media and stuff, because you don't have someone's attention for long. If you can sell someone the entire game idea in 5 seconds, so they see a GIF, they quickly watch it and they move on. But if you can sell them that entire idea in 5 seconds that they understand, then they might remember that and they might be intrigued and want to click your profile and find more about it. If you have if you say you've got a football game and you show a GIF of a stadium, that's okay. But I don't know what the game's about. Is it a football manager? Is it if you show like the image, say you've got a FIFA style game, so you've got all the players kicking the ball about, and there's a little player being controlled. I know that I'm controlling a player and he's going to be kicking the ball, and it's roughly FIFA like. But if you can get that across in 5 seconds, that's great. And posting that on Twitter with the correct hashtags as well, like indie dev, game dev. Hashtags are really powerful for reach. But yeah, Discords are really good because you can have like-minded people and just, show off your work. People want to show off their work. You can give feedback. That's another valuable tool is feedback, especially from people who are also in your industry. It's just knowing where to put things. And obviously, if you're building a portfolio, don't overfill that portfolio. Put it should be for the work you're most proud of. You could have loads of stuff, but you want again, people's time is precious. So if you send your portfolio to someone, they're going to have up to maybe like 30 seconds to gloss over it.
Yeah.
So you want to grab their attention quick. You want to say, hey, this is my best work. This is this. And, again, if it's GIFs, they can quickly do that. If it's a little video, great. If it's a little demo, good as well. But you just need to know where to put these things, and you'll meet people, but you'll get followers on Twitter. You can follow them, and it's a natural a result of spreading your game out to the world is that people become interested in it, or not necessarily game, but people become interested, and therefore you meet new people that way.
Yeah, and just keep an eye out for other communities as well. So you've got Discord, you've got things like Reddit, Twitter.
Reddit is very good.
Facebook groups, all these different community groups together are great for you to communicate with people. And Chris was saying, show off your work, and I can't emphasize that enough, that you must show off your work. You may, and this, everyone is guilty of this problem, where we look at our work and think that it looks like crap and that it doesn't look good at all, doesn't look professional at all, and it is not going to impress anyone. You have to just learn to get over that and just put out your work. You're bound to impress at least one person. Yeah. So put it out there and get feedback, get some advice and guidance, and you'll see people actually applauding your work, probably more so than criticizing it, I find. And if they are criticizing, usually it's with constructive criticism. The game dev community is quite good at that.
Yes.
Don't post it in gaming communities where game players are. Post it in game developer communities.
Yeah, that's very important.
Yeah, players are a bit more, let's say, forthcoming with the criticism, I have to say, than the praise. But just definitely go to game dev communities and search them up everywhere and join them. And as we are going into this new age of like working from home and all these distance-based development studios and all that stuff, people are making games still just at home. I think Ori and the Blind Forest, when that was developed, that was all done remotely from people all over the world. There wasn't a studio. They were all remotely working on that game, and it does come with its own challenges, but they're different challenges. They're still there. There's still those opportunities there.
Yeah.
So keep putting that out there. And as you asked Josh about something to make money, me and Chris already mentioned Fiverr. Great place to put stuff on, and it's also a great place to start your building your portfolio up as well, because you're forced and encouraged to work on projects that aren't your own, and it kind of like pushes you creatively because you're now working towards someone else's brief, and you can then and sometimes that work goes into actual published products, and you can say like point to these things like, look, my artwork or my code is in a published game, it's there, you can see it, and that's part of your portfolio right there, and you get a bit of money on the side as well. So Fiverr's great for that. I really recommend it. The forums wise, I'd say IndieDB is quite good for forum discussion and getting job work out there as well. But you do find that's a lot of people asking for free work. But as we already said, don't do that if you can help it. And final email we got from Dusty Memes saying, what should you do and don't do when making a new project? So quite a large topic that we've covered quite a lot of already. But if we had to sum it down to a couple, one do and one don't do each, what would your do and don't do be?
I'll start off with my don't is don't feature creep. We're all guilty of it. We all have wild imaginations. We all want this thing to, what if it did this? No, get it to do the thing, the basic thing first. And then, if that works, then you go, hey, that worked. Let's move on. The do for me is test often. Even at a base level, if it doesn't feel right and you can't tweak it and a good way to tweak something is, say if you've got, hey, this goes at a speed of 5 and it feels a bit slow, double it to 10. And then you go, that's way too fast. Okay, so then half it. Oh no, sorry, go in between the 5, so go 7.5. And it's a good way of doing it because you get the extremes. I do it a lot, and sometimes I forget to change things, and things will fly off, and I'm like, oh god. I like to add a 0 on normally, just to really, really kick things up. It's a good way of doing it. But testing is valuable, and there's one of the best bits of advice I ever got was look for that 5 minutes of fun. You get that 5 minutes of fun, then you move on to 10 minutes of fun. If it fails at 10 minutes, you go back to the 5 minutes and see what went wrong. And you keep figuring it out like that. And that's a good way to develop. If you're not enjoying it, other people aren't going to enjoy it.
My do's and don'ts would be do manage the scope of your game. We've already talked about this at length. Don't be tempted to pick a project that is like your dream game, because your dream game no doubt will be a massive project that you can't do. So do manage the scope of your game and keep that in check at all times, and that ties into the feature creep problem. Like that's that scope, making sure that scope stays managed. As for don'ts, don't be shy. Talk about your idea to people, get feedback on your idea, show them prototypes, and that's where those game dev communities come in really handy, because you can talk about those prototypes with it, talk to friends, family, share ideas. I found family really useful for me for Blob, because they were my target audience. The people that sit on their phones all day and not really typical gamers. They want to play on their phone rather than consoles or PC. So I went to them. I went, look, do you like this? Do you like this feature? What would keep you interested? And I spoke to them a lot about it. My wife especially. So don't be shy about it, and do manage the scope of your game. And I think that'll do us for emails. As I said, if you want to email the show, you can email me at podcast@ryanlaley.com. That is podcast@ryanlaley.com. Thank you, Chris. That brings us to the end of our first episode. Thank you so much for joining us in our inaugural episode.
It's been a pleasure, as always.
Yes, great. Thank you. And do you want a last-minute plug of your game?
I'd love to. So our game is Brunch Club. It's a local co-op party game where we mix food, physics, and it's hellish if you don't work as a team. We also have some versus modes where you can get vengeance on your friends.
Yeah, me and my wife shout at each other quite a lot.
Oh, that's what we want. That's what we want. Is the breakup
problems.
Yeah, perfect. It's out on Switch and Steam. If that sounds like your kind of thing, don't go buy it.
Yeah, excellent.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Chris, for joining us. In next week's episode, we are going to be talking about building a team and working with other people. So if you have any questions about building your team and working with other people, email the show at podcast@ryanlaley.com, and we'll feature your emails in next week's show. Thank you, Chris, for joining me today, and thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.